Have you noticed that it feels like everything is coming back? Old logos are returning. Vintage packaging is showing back up on shelves. Trends from the 90s and early 2000s are suddenly cool again. Every brand that spent years trying to look modern, sleek, and futuristic is suddenly digging through their archives. They are bringing back designs from decades ago. And it's not happening by accident. Nostalgia has become one of the most powerful tools in modern branding. But why? Why are brands suddenly looking backwards instead of forward? And what could designers take from this trend? Today I want to explore why brands these days love nostalgia, how they use it, and why it works so well on us, even when we know exactly what they're doing. Let's start with something simple. The world changes fast. Technology changes, social media changes, trends change. Entire industries change. Sometimes it feels like the moment you learn something, it is suddenly outdated. And because of that, people naturally look for things that seem stable and familiar. Nostalgia gives us that feeling. We see something that suddenly reminds us of happier and simpler times. Our brains often attach positive emotions to it. It creates a sense of comfort and familiarity. And brands know this. If a package reminds you of your childhood, you feel warmer towards it. If a logo reminds you of a time when you suddenly discovered your favorite product, you lean more towards it. The interesting part about brands is they're not only selling a product. Sometimes they're selling that feeling associated with that product. And that distinction is incredibly important. People don't just buy cereal. They buy Saturday morning cartoon memories. They're not just buying a video game. They're buying that memory of coming home from school and playing it with their friends. They don't just buy a soft drink. They're buying a tiny piece of a time period that they remember fondly. One of the hardest things for any brand to do is build trust, because trust takes time. Normally, brands spend years creating relationships with their customers. Nostalgia, it acts as a shortcut. When a brand suddenly revives an old logo or an old packaging system, it instantly taps into memories that people already have with them. Think about how often companies release throwback editions, and suddenly everyone starts talking about them online. People share photos, people compare it to the original, people tell stories, and the product, it becomes more than just a product. It becomes a conversation, and conversations are marketing gold. A nostalgic design can generate emotional engagement much faster than a new design can. And it's because the customer already has a history with it. And that is why history is valuable. One reason that nostalgia seems so common these days is because we have multiple generations participating online. A few decades ago, trends moved more in a linear direction, and today they exist all at once. A teenager can discover a song from the 1980s. Someone in their 30s can revisit a trend from the early 2000s. Someone in their 50s can reconnect with a design from their childhood. Social media allows brands to target all those audiences at once, and this creates an insane opportunity. A company can release a nostalgic campaign for older customers and introduce it to the younger customers, to something that feels new to them. That's one of the fascinating things about nostalgia. Something could be nostalgic for one generation and completely new to another. Let's talk about some real examples. One of the most famous examples is the return of retro packaging. Many food brands have re-released older versions of limited edition food packaging design. The product inside stays exactly the same. The package changes, and yay, people get excited. And this all tells us something very important that I always say on this channel. Design matters. Visual presentation influences how people feel about a product. Another example we have is logo revivals. Many companies have experimented with bringing back older logos, either permanently or for a special campaign. And most of the time, these logos feel more human and distinctive in comparison to their modern, sleek designs. The consumer often responds positively because it feels more authentic. And fashion brands do this constantly. Vintage-inspired collections, they reappear year after year. Older color palettes return. Classic typography comes back. Archive designs get reintroduced to a younger audience. And the same thing happens in entertainment. Movie franchises return. Television reboots appear. Classic characters get redesigned for a modern audience. Even if people complain about the remakes, it still gets attention. And attention is one of the most valuable currencies in today's marketplace. And this is where things get particularly interesting for graphic designers. Most people think that nostalgia is about copying the past. It's not, at least not when it's done well. Successful nostalgic branding is about capturing the feeling rather than recreating the same thing. There's a big difference. Imagine a company actually bringing back a package from 1985. If they copy every detail exactly, it might feel dated. But if they're able to identify what people love about that design, the warmth, the personality, the colors, then they can reinterpret it for a new audience. And that is much harder to do than simply copying. Good nostalgia design requires knowing why people like the design in the first place. Designers are acting as historians and psychologists at the same time. We study these emotional connections. We're identifying visual cues, and then we're taking those cues and translating them for something relevant today. And that's a really fascinating and fun challenge. And there's another factor worth discussing. For years, brands moved heavily towards minimalism. Many logos became simpler. Many brands adopted the same visual cues. Sans serif typography reigned over the land, and flat design could be seen everywhere. Large compositions started looking surprisingly similar. Now, to be clear, minimalism is not bad. In fact, I love minimalism. There are many situations where it works extremely well. But when every brand starts making the same decisions, that's when it becomes a problem. Because differentiation becomes harder. And consumers, they start noticing. And as a result, right now, brands are looking for a way to stand out again. Nostalgia offers that solution. Older designs often contained more personality, unique illustrations, decorative typography, very diverse visual elements. Brands started to realize that the personality that had been slowly removed is actually what the customer missed. So then we start seeing a new shift. Not a complete rejection of minimalism, but it's more like a balancing act. Brands are doing this kind of cool thing right now where they're combining modern usability with vintage personality. And of course, nostalgia isn't always successful. Sometimes a brand will rely on it too heavily. If nostalgia is the only thing that the brand could offer, it sometimes feels shallow. And consumers are actually smarter than companies sometimes give them credit for. People could tell when something is genuine. They could also tell when a brand is trying to desperately manufacture emotion. The strongest nostalgia campaigns connect to a real story, connect to a real brand heritage, connect to these authentic experiences. When the brand tries to blindly chase trends and not understand how nostalgia actually works, the results can feel very forced. And that is why a good strategy matters. Good design isn't just about making something look old. It's about understanding the emotional role that the visual language serves. I think one of the biggest lessons here is that people crave connection. As designers, we spend a lot of time discussing software trends and typography, color theory and technical skills, and those things matter. But nostalgia reminds us that design is actually about the people. People remember experiences. People remember feelings. The customer remembers moments, and the designs that are associated with those moments, they become powerful emotional artifacts. That is why an old logo can spark memories. That is why vintage packaging can make someone smile. And that is why a certain color palette can automatically transport someone back to a different point in time. And as designers, understanding those emotional connections, it makes us more powerful communicators. Modern brands love nostalgia because nostalgia works. It creates emotional connections. It builds trust. It sparks conversation. It helps the brand stand out in a crowded market. The most successful nostalgic branding isn't really about the past. It's about using the past to create meaning in the present. And that's the part about all of this that I find the most interesting. The goal is not to freeze time. The goal is to understand why certain designs mattered so much to people and carry those lessons forward. Because at the end of the day, great branding isn't about chasing the most recent trend. And it's not about endlessly repeating the old ones either. It's about creating meaningful connections. Sometimes the future of design comes from innovation. Sometimes it's about looking back on the past and rediscovering what people loved all along. And maybe that's why nostalgia keeps showing up. Not because brands ran out of ideas. Maybe it's because us as human beings, we never stop valuing memories, emotions, and stories that help shape who we are. But okay, guys, that's all I have for you for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making it. I think this is a fun topic to cover. And if you did, don't forget to give it a like. Subscribe for more videos just like this because I make them every single week. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye!